Gym Candy Part 4, Chapter 1. Saturday morning, I was at Popeye's at 9 sharp. "How'd the scrimmage go?" Peter asked as soon as he saw me. "Could we talk?" "Sure," he said. "Come into the back." I followed him to the meeting room behind the main counter. The table had a bowl of bananas in the center. "Not so good?" he asked as he sat, taking a banana out of the bowl. I sat across from him. "Tell me about that stuff again." "What stuff?" "You know." "The Diana ball? What do you want to know?" "You're sure it's safe?" "I took it for a year. I do different things now, but I never had any problems." "And I'd notice a difference?" "Yeah, definitely. You'll be able to lift more and you'll be able to lift longer. People know steroids make you stronger, but stamina, that's where they help big time." "Could I take them for a while, say until school starts, and stop?" He nodded. "Guys go off and on steroids all the time." "Are you sure?" I said. "I don't want to get addicted to anything." "Mick, it's like this. Once guys get on the candy, they like the results. They keep taking steroids because they don't want to stop, not because they can't stop. But if someday you decide to quit, I promise that you're not going to roll around on the ground crying and screaming like some wild-eyed heroin user desperate for a fix." I took a deep breath and exhaled. "How much would it cost?" "About the same as what you're spending on the stuff you're taking now." "No more?" "Maybe $10-20 a month more." "Should I keep taking the stuff I'm taking now?" "The protein shakes are good, but dump the pills." "How soon could I start?" "I've got product in my locker right now. You could start today." "Today?" I said. "You mean right now?" "Why not?" I took up my wallet and opened it up. "I've only got $20 with me." "That's okay. 20 will get you going." He paused. "Do you want to do this or not?" I swallowed. "I want to do it," I said, and then slid him the $20. "Wait here," he said, and he left the room. When he came back, he sat down next to me, opened a plastic vial, and took out 4 white tablets that were about 3 times as thick as aspirin. Guys just call it D-Bol. He looked at them, but I didn't pick them up. "So I take these and I get bigger?" He shook his head. "Not that easy. You have to work out even more than before. But it's better because the results are bang right there." "So do I just take them right now?" "Slow down a second. There are things you need to know. You have to be careful about dosage and how long you're on it. Otherwise, D-Bol will do some gross things to you." "Gross like what?" Peter frowned. "Like you start growing breasts." I felt my head jerk back as if I'd been slapped. He put his hands up to reassure me. "I know it sounds creepy, but really, it's good. A side effect like that keeps you from abusing the stuff. As soon as you see it starting to happen, you stop taking the D-Bol. I'll give you some pills that clean out the bad things. You'll lose some strength, but once your system is cleaned out, you go right back on D-Bol. And you have the other stuff, the stuff that keeps me from looking like a girl?" "It's called Nolvadex. And Mick, I would never give you the D-Bol without having the Nolvadex ready for you when you need it. Never." I looked in his eyes and I knew he was telling the truth. I picked up one of the pills and rolled it around in my fingertips. "How long before I see changes?" 4 or 5 days. The first thing you'll notice is that you'll be able to work out longer and lift more. There are other cool things too. You got some sore muscle or pain in your back? You take these and it'll be gone. I thought about how close I was. I wouldn't need much to win my job back from Dave Kane. "But for sure I'd be stronger by August?" He nodded. "Mick, you do the D-Bol and you keep lifting weights and eating right. You do all those things and you will definitely be stronger by August." He paused. "So what do you say? You ready?" I fingered the pills on the table. "I'm ready." Peter went to the sink, poured me a glass of water, and slid it to me. "Your body puts out testosterone during the night, so you take the D-Bol in the morning. Start with 4 pills a day. Later you might go to 6, but we'll see about that." I put 2 of the pills in my mouth, took a big gulp of water, and swallowed them down. Then I picked up the other 2 and did the same. He handed me the plastic bottle and I slipped it into my duffel. "2 more things," he said. "Being on steroids is like being on a roller coaster. Sometimes you'll get a kind of screw the world feeling. You'll feel secretly strong and confident, like Tobey Maguire just before he transforms into Spider-Man. It's actually kind of cool, so long as you don't let it blow up into a full-force roid rage. And it won't if you don't let it. What's the other thing? I asked. The other thing isn't cool at all. Sometimes steroids can turn the whole world into a black hole. I'm talking serious, dangerous depression. Watch out for that too. I want this stuff to help you, Mick, not mess you up. Chapter 2. The depot kicked in Thursday. I was doing my usual set of squats. I'd reached the last ones, the ones that always burned like a hot iron, and I breezed through them. I was able to do one more complete set before the fire came. I went over to the free weights and did some presses, and it was the same thing. After that, I did calf raises and deadlifts and hit the cable machine for rows. I was looking around for something else to do when Peter came over. It kicked in, I said softly. I'm sure it did. Pretty awesome, isn't it? You're on the train now. You'll be surprised how fast it moves. He paused. Go home, Mick. Eat. Sleep. When you come tomorrow, I'll have a whole new workout schedule for you. I drove home, rap music blasting. I was on such a high that I reached for my cell phone to call Drew and tell him before it hit me that I couldn't tell Drew or anyone on the team anything ever. The next day, I spotted Peter by one of the elliptical machines, showing an older guy how it worked. I was anxious to talk to him, but Peter stayed with the old guy for 20 minutes before he finally came over. Let's go in the back, he said. Once we were sitting down, he pulled out 3 typed pages and laid them down in front of me. This is your program from now on. The days of the week were written across the top of each page. Underneath were the focus muscle groups, and underneath that he'd listed the specific lists I was to do along with the reps. Monday and Thursday were for my back and my legs. Tuesday and Friday it was chest and my shoulders and my arms. Wednesday and Saturday he had me working everything. I couldn't believe how detailed it was and how many reps he expected me to do. How come you didn't give me anything like this before? I asked. You weren't taking D-Bowl before. You couldn't have done it. Chapter 3. I had nothing against Russ Diver. In fact, I've always liked the guy. Everybody liked the guy. He was completely harmless, the class clown, the jolly fat guy. But as the final weeks of the school year wound down, I found myself disliking him. Whenever I saw him, a physical revulsion would come over me, a revulsion that seemed to grow and grow. On the second to last day of school, I was walking down the hall when Diver came around the corner, laughing his big fat guy laugh and not looking where he was going. He smacked right into me, knocking my backpack out of my hand and sending my stuff flying all over the place. Dumb me, he yelped, slapping himself on the forehead, an idiotic smile on his face. He was reaching down to pick up my books. Instead of letting him do it, I lost it, like a volcano that erupts without warning. I grabbed Diver by the shoulder and pinned him against a locker. The smile was gone from his face. Fear was written in his eyes. Let me go, Mick, he said. Let me go. The whole time I held him, I knew I was acting crazy. I wanted to stop, but then Diver started crying, and that made me even more crazy mad. I yanked him away from the locker and slammed him back into one, the metal clanging from the force. That was when somebody grabbed me from behind. I spun around, fists clenched. It was Drew. Easy, Mick. His hand gripped my forearm. I tried to pull away, but Drew held tight. Don't do anything stupid. His voice was quiet, but his eyes were intense. For 10 seconds, he held my arm, and then I felt the anger subside. Get out of here, Russ, Drew said, looking over my shoulder. Instantly, Diver disappeared down the hall. Drew looked around at the other kids who were still gawking. The rest of you, get out of here too. Slowly, they moved off, looking back over their shoulders at me. Finally, Drew let go of my arm. What was that all about? He knocked my stuff onto the ground, I said. Besides, he annoys me. As I spoke, I knew how stupid I was sounding. Drew groaned. Get real, Mick. Russ didn't mean anything. You hit him and you'll get suspended from school, which means a suspension from the team. You trying to give your position to Dave Kane? Besides, hitting Russ Diver, that's not for you. Drew crouched down and started gathering up my books. I watched for a while, knowing he was 100% right, before I got down and helped him. Thanks, I said. Once my junk was shoved in and the backpack was zipped shut. I owed you, Drew said. I still do. Chapter 4. That was the first time the roid rage came over me, but once that edgy feeling came, it never entirely left. Most of the time it was no big deal, like having a tiny rock in my shoe that I couldn't get rid of. But every once in a while, it was as if I were a downed electrical wire after a huge storm. In those moments, if somebody nudged me even a little, I could feel the bolts of electricity raging through me. I had to be very, very careful to keep myself from tumbling over the edge. That was the bad thing about the D-Bowl. The good thing was simple. It worked. While I'd been on the supplement and the protein drink, I'd gained a pound every 3 or 4 weeks. With the D-Bowl, I was gaining nearly a pound a week, and I was setting personal bests almost every day. I didn't mess around with the team's summer workouts. Instead, first thing in the morning, I'd drive across the Ballard Bridge to Seattle Pacific University. I'd run on their rubberized track, 3 miles for endurance, and then interval work for strength. After that, I'd go to Popeyes, take my D-Bowls, and do my lifting. I could almost feel my muscles growing every day, my stamina increasing. Once you start getting bigger, you just want to keep getting bigger. Peter had said it felt like being on a train, but there were days when I felt like I was the train. My workouts were so intense that by noon, I'd have exhausted myself. I'd come home, eat lunch, and then start working on my dad's summer project, painting the house. I started with sanding and scraping the peeling paint. Everything took 4 times longer than I figured. Most days I worked 5 hours, but that was okay. The D-Bowl was expensive, so I needed to earn as much money as I could. My mom would come home around 6:30. She'd make me dinner, and then I'd go upstairs and play video games or watch TV. After about a week, she asked me where Drew was. "He's around," I said. "How come I don't see him?" I shrugged. "He hangs out with Deshawn mainly." "I thought the 3 of you hung out together." "Mom, I'm busy. I run, I do my lifting, Dad has me painting. I don't have time to hang out." Her eyebrows knitted. "It's summer. You're 16. I want to see you having fun." "I'm doing exactly what I want to do," I said. "Everything's fine." That's what I said, but lots of nights I'd start playing Halo or some other video game, and 10 minutes later I'd turn it off. Then I'd lie back and wonder what Drew is doing. A couple of times I thought about calling him, but I knew he'd ask me how things were going at Popeyes. I didn't want to talk about that. Chapter 5. A little before school had let out, I started getting the zits. For a while there were just a few, and I wasn't sure it was the D-Bowl causing them. But then more and more appeared, mainly on my back and chest. I kept a shirt on, always, even when it was hot, and after a while in the bathroom, I used only the nightlight so I wouldn't have to see them. I could have lived with the zits for a long time, but then something gross happened. It was the first day of July, about 6 weeks after I'd started with the D-Bowl. I took a shower, and as I dried myself off, I noticed that my nipples looked puffy and thick. Maybe I was imagining things, but the next day they looked worse. I sucked up my courage and told Peter. "That's good," he said, putting his arm around my shoulder and walking me toward a corner of the gym. "You're telling me right away. I mean, I've known guys who hide it, hoping it will go away on its own. It doesn't. So what do I do?" "Wait here," he said. A couple of minutes later, he came back with a small brown bag. Inside was a vial of pills. "I told you I'd never leave you hanging, didn't I? You stop taking the D-Bowl and you take these instead. They'll clean you out." "For how long?" "Hard to say. 2 weeks, maybe less. Everybody's different. Once your body gets back to normal, you can take the D-Bowl again." "But what if I don't take the D-Bowl for 2 weeks? Won't I slip back?" He looked at me sideways. "Yeah, you will. I told you up front. That's how D-Bowl is. 2 steps forward, 1 step back." "I can't step back now," I said, suddenly feeling desperate. "Football tryouts are in August. I've got to keep going forward." "You've got no choice, Mick. Your body is screaming, stop." I stared at him. He was rock solid. "How come you don't have zits? How come you never lose muscle?" "I've got zits," he said. "Not on my face, but on my back and chest." "But you don't ever cut back on your workouts, do you?" He bobbed his head this way and that. "No, not really." "So how can you keep going and I can't?" He shrugged. "I take different stuff from you." "What stuff?" "A combination of drugs. It's called doing a stack." "Why can't I do a stack?" "Because you wouldn't want to use the things I'm using." "Why not?" "Because you've got to inject yourself." I stared at him. "You mean with a needle, like heroin?" With a needle, but not like heroin. You shoot up? I give myself injections, but I don't do it to get high, and I'm not addicted to anything. So I wouldn't call it shooting up. I nodded toward the gym. The serious bodybuilders, do they shoot up too? Some do, some don't. I shook my head back and forth. I'm not sticking a needle in my arm. No way. Peter threw his arms out. Nobody's asking you to do injections. I knew you wouldn't want to, which is why I never brought it up. But just so you know, you don't stick a needle in your arm. You stick it in your butt. I don't care where you stick it. I'm not doing it. I hear you, Mick. I hear you loud and clear. No injections. He took a deep breath. Look, I've got other people I've got to work with. Take some time off. Get away from the gym. Don't come back until your system is cleaned out. Then we'll get you going on the D-ball again, and you won't feel so bad about all of this. Chapter 6. Once I left Popeyes, I walked along the Fremont Cut. It was a hot day. Sailboats were moving through the cut toward the Puget Sound. I sat down on a bench by the bridge and looked out. My mind was going 1,000,000 times faster than the traffic on the bridge. I could feel the rage coming, only this time it wasn't directed at Russ Diver or anybody else. My rage was aimed squarely at me. The zits, the puffy nipples, they were betraying me. I hated my body, hated what I was doing. When I needed it to be strong, it had gone weak. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That sounds okay until the day comes when it's time to step back and you find out it isn't okay. Bells started clanging and the Fremont drawbridge slowly rose, allowing sailboats through. Traffic backed up, gulls wheeled in the sky. A huge sailboat glided past. The bridge slowly came down again. I walked back to the Jeep and drove home. At home, my dad took me into the yard and showed me how to work a power washer he'd rented. I climbed a ladder and washed the 2nd story, spraying everywhere, drenching me. After lunch, I cleaned the ground floor, finishing at 2:30. I would have to let the siding dry for 4 days before I could paint. The whole day, the whole week, stretched out in front of me, and it was right then, almost as if by a miracle, that my cell phone rang. "Hey, Mick," Drew said. "What's up?" "Nothing," I said, glad to hear his voice. "Really?" he said in disbelief. "You really got nothing going? I thought you had every minute of the summer planned out. Workouts at your gym and work for your dad and all that." "I'm taking a short break from my workouts. I just power wash the house, and it's got to dry before I can paint. So I've got nothing going." "Well, that's great," he said, his voice excited, "because I was hoping you'd want to hang out some, but I didn't figure you have time." "I've got time." "All right, then. Here's the deal. Deshawn and I have been going to Green Lake in the afternoons to play volleyball with Natalie, Heather, and Kaylee. That group. Brad Middleton has been coming, but he just left for Scotland with his family. We need another player." He paused. "It'll be fun, and Kaylee especially will like seeing you. She's got a thing for you, I think. What do you say?" When's all this happening?" I asked. "Now," he said. "Well, not right now, but in half an hour. The big field across from Starbucks." I felt like a drowning man in the ocean who suddenly sees a boat heading his way. "I'll be there. I can give you a ride if you want." "Thanks, but I don't need one. I got my permit last week. My dad will drive down with me. He wants me to get practice on hills." First, I had trouble finding a parking spot near the lake, and then, as I walked toward the lake, a feeling of panic came over me. I hadn't hung out with anyone for a long time. I wasn't sure I knew what to say or how to act. I considered turning around and going home, but Kaylee saw me and waved. She was wearing light blue shorts and a white tank top. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and her whole body was tan and somehow seemed to glow. Heather and Natalie were there too, along with Drew and Deshawn. I joined in the large circle and tried to warm up with them. I felt useless until Kaylee took me to the side and showed me how to bump a volleyball. Sometimes I was decent, but about every third hit would go careening off wildly. I felt certain I'd ruin the game for everyone, but Kaylee only laughed. "You'll get it, Mick. It takes time." Nets were set up for pickup games all around the field. The rules were simple. Win and you keep playing. Lose and you sit out. Deshawn and Kaylee were great. The other girls were good. Drew was okay, and I was up and down, occasionally making decent shots, but at other times fouling up easy balls. We lost more than we won, but nobody seemed to care. Around 5, we went over to Guaymas and ate nachos, and then we walked around Green Lake, paired up. See you tomorrow? Kaylee said when we were back at the field. Yeah, I said. See you tomorrow.